Memories. God, who needs them? When my friends tell me about their childhood, I just want to leave the room. I don't like talking about the past, but the funny thing is, I've always been obsessed by it. I look at pictures of my childhood over and over again, knowing full well that they are only an illusion. My real past is hidden somewhere else. At some point back there, I started to live a secret life. The truth was, Mummy was an alcoholic. I remember coming home from school and being afraid to go inside, because I might find her passed out on the living room floor. Or she might be trying to kill herself again. If she'd been sick or made a mess, I'd have to clean it up. Sometimes she lay in bed for days on end without getting up. Then I'd have to go into her bedroom every night to check on her. It always scared me to touch her because I thought she might be dead. When my mother was sober, she denied that she drank at all. I started to hate her, and sometimes I even wished she would die. I wanted more than anything else to understand my mother, to know why she drank. As a child, I believed that if I could just find the answer, I could make her stop, but I never did. I could see it coming, so it was no surprise when my mother and father divorced and our family was split apart. Eventually, my mother drank herself to death. She was 54. Her vacant gaze, her silence, were the last I remember of her. With my mother gone, I hoped it was all over, that I could leave the past behind me and finally get on with my own life. But the feelings I had as a child, the shame and terrible anxiety, wouldn't go away. And I was bothered by these pictures of a perfect family when my memories told a completely different story. My 3 brothers, my sister and I, were often left to care for ourselves. As kids, we always stuck together and depended on each other. Through all the ups and downs of my mother's drinking, this little family of children was the only thing we could be sure of. At the time, it seemed that we were all surviving pretty well and that it wasn't really affecting us. But now I'm not so sure. I know that statistics show there's a good chance at least one of us children will become alcoholic like my mother, or addicted to drugs, or self-destructive in some other way. I wish I could forget the past, but I can't. It seems that somewhere back there is a key that could make sense of my memories and help me escape my mother's fate. I used to think my childhood was unusual, and then I discovered that there are about 30 million people in North America who have at least one alcoholic parent. I've started talking to other children of alcoholics to see if their stories will help me understand my own. It seems that most of us are still struggling with the memories and confusion of childhood.
Oh, sure, she can't get the next one.
Linda Simons and her sister Kathy were raised by their mother, Mickey, a single parent at the time. Mickey was an alcoholic who drank for most of the time they were growing up.
Good. Listen, I'm the mother here, right? Oh, hey, look at those. Yeah. Yeah, they have. Hey, give me some room.
You had your chance. Oh, that's nice.
Now, hey, is that a hat?
No.
Oh, yes.
That's nice.
Too young?
No.
This is gorgeous.
After many attempts, Mickey finally stopped drinking about 12 years ago. What I wanted to know was how the early years of her drinking had affected her two daughters.
Yeah, that is really. Well, get it. Now you know.
Linda, the oldest, remembers struggling to control her life and trying to keep the family together.
When I was a little kid, I was scared all the time. And I never really thought about it before.
Last week.
I just remember Mama come home and I'd put her to bed and I'd clean up and then I'd go out and play, but
I used to.
always scared that one time she wasn't gonna come home.
Too much on my chin.
She went through stages where everything would be all right for a little while and then she would start drinking again. And then when she would drink for a couple of weeks at a time and all hell broke loose in the house. Like the place was messy and, like 10-year-old can only clean up so much. They don't get into the really nitty-gritty stuff. And there'd be people over all the time, parties. And then when the money ran out, the booze ran out, well then she'd be sober for a couple of weeks, and that was great.
Yeah. A lot of people like us that grow up with an alcoholic parent, I think, feel that sense of impending doom all the time.
Yeah, well, when they go out, you never know, are they going to come back this time, especially if they stay out overnight. But a lot of times I thought, well, no, she'll be home.
Did you ever think that it would all end? Did you ever, hope that someday your mom would stop drinking?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, I wish she would stop drinking all the time, because when she wasn't drinking, it was great. She was happy, and she would cook, and she would clean, and we could just play and be kids. Normal.
It must have driven you crazy. I mean, just having that kind of up and down cycle all the time.
I don't remember feeling crazy or anything like that. It would just happen. It was normal. I remember this was one of the best times. When she'd be sober, she'd come in the morning and she'd bundle one of us up at a time in a blanket because it was really cold. I don't know if we had any heat or not. And she'd take me out and sit me down at the table, and she'd go in and bundle Kathy up in the blanket, and she'd sit her at the table, and then she'd make us breakfast. And then we'd sit there, and it was just really cozy. It was really warm and nice and loving, and that was great. And then she'd go on a drinking binge again, and everything would be back to yuck.
I'm sorry, you're going to have what?
It's called Norlette or something. It's run by a guy and a woman.
Yeah.
A husband and wife. I haven't...
Linda and Kathy are in their late 20s now, and both have families of their own. They still spend a lot of time together, but they've never really talked about what happened in the past, the chaos at home, their mother's bouts of drinking, and how they felt at the time. Sometimes it's hard to remember exactly what happened.
Did you want any?
No. I'll have some later.
Okay.
I remember when Mom used to be going out drinking. I would know she was going out because she used to put on her orange blouse. Remember her orange blouse? The long sleeves, big wide.
No.
It was see-through. It had a really big collar.
No, all I remember is just her. She was going. That's it.
To me, every time Mom went out, I'd picture that outfit. I knew she was going out and I'd start crying. And you used to come over and you'd put your arm around me and you'd say, oh, it's okay. We're going to have the house to ourselves and we'll have chips and watch TV and all that.
Vaguely, but not.
No, oh, well, that's what used to make me feel better.
Okay, I remember when she was usually pretty drunk, falling in the door. Not walking, falling in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd help her and she'd be going on about how much she loved us and squishing us. And just undress her, put her to bed, and take all the money that she had left and hide it.
You used to hide her money?
Well, yeah, buy food, pay the rent and that, what was left.
I remember if we were in bed and I could hear, the country and western music she used to play, if I could hear that playing, I knew something was wrong.
Oh, because she'd be crying?
Yeah. She'd start getting herself all upset. Well, she'd be drinking, she'd be by herself. But whenever that music came on, I knew that there was something wrong, and I could not sleep, and I used to keep coming upstairs and checking on her. Well, I associate that music with when she used to try and kill herself.
Mm-hmm.
That's what usually happened when she played that stuff.
I remember another time when she tried to kill herself, and I was just, because I knew she did it all the time, I just got so fed up. She told me she was going to kill herself. She took out all her nerve pills, and she says, "Get me a glass of water." And I said, "Fine, here." She's sitting there, and I can't remember what she was doing, but then she passed out. I put her on the couch, and I just went and phoned Judy, and I said, "She did it again."
Yeah?
And I went in the bedroom and watched TV. When things got a little rough at home or something, I just needed to be alone, I'd come down here. And either just walk around, or sometimes I'd lay in the grass, look up at the stars.
What kinds of things would you be feeling when you come down here?
Well, most of the times when I'd come down here, I would bring some of my own things. I can't remember what, a doll or something. And I'd come down and I'd just pretend that things were okay, and I lived at a different house and with Mom, but everything was okay.
One day, Linda came home to find her mother being taken away in an ambulance. She didn't see her mother again for 5 years. Linda and Kathy were separated from their 2 younger brothers and placed in foster homes.
When we came back home, when she stopped drinking, there was a lot of tension in the house. She was a lot rougher on us than when she was drinking.
Do you think maybe you resented all those years that she had been drinking?
I'm not sure if I resented the years that she was drinking or not. Or if resented being taken away. I think I did there. But I didn't blame it all on her. Blamed it on the Children's Aid.
Yeah.
As a kid, because you're trying to protect your mother, you blame it on somebody else. Because I loved her, no matter what she did. I really loved her. She was everything to me. The first 2 days, all I did was stare at her. I couldn't believe we were home. I just stared at her. I couldn't believe she was there. I was, 17 when we finally came home, and I thought, they can't take us away now, no matter what happens. We're too old now, right? And I followed her everywhere. Everywhere. She went for a nap, and I was sitting there. I remember one day she went for a nap, and I was sitting there, and I was just watching her. And she got up, and she yelled at me. She said, "Get out of the goddamn room. I've had enough. You're like my bloody shadow," right? And I just started crying, and ever since then, there was a little distance between us, I found.
Why did you feel like you had to follow her around? Were you afraid she was going to start drinking again?
Yeah, maybe I didn't want her to go away. I understand what she went through, and like I said, I don't hate her. I think back, she was 16 years old. She had 2 kids. She had to get married. I think about my life. I'm lucky, even with what I went through. I don't think of her then as my mother. She was just a 16-year-old kid with problems.
Even though they remain close, Linda has never told her mother how she felt as a child. I can understand how hard it must be for her to bring back those memories. But she was willing to talk to her mother about some of the things that were bothering her. So I asked if the 3 of us could meet. We decided to get together at a restaurant where Mickey worked 20 years ago, about the time that she first started drinking.
$6. Amazing. That's all. So this is it. You ready for this? I don't know if I'm ready.
When you came back home and your mother was into her sobriety, at this point you were talking to me about following her around. The first couple of days when you got home, you followed her around. And,
First few months, first year. I stared at her, first of all. And then I just followed you to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Wait outside the bathroom door for you to come out. And then followed you everywhere you went.
Yeah.
Except for that one time you went in for a nap.
Which time was that? I had a lot of naps.
And I was sitting in the chair waiting for you to wake up, and you were still awake. You rolled over. And you just said, "Get the hell out of this room. Stop following me around. You're not my shadow," something like that.
Yeah.
And just,
I was trying so hard to prove, to you and Kathy that this time I'm sober. This time it's not a couple of days and it's not a lot of promises. I guess part of me was really expecting that you should see that. And but every time I turned around, you were there, and it was almost like she doesn't trust me, which of course you didn't, but
no,
I expected that you should, Never, ever once did I ever say I'm going to go out and get drunk. I always was able to tell myself that this time it was going to be different. This time I'd go out for a couple of hours, have a few drinks, have some fun, and come home. But it never worked that way, and I just...
Yeah, sometimes I never knew, if when you went out, if you were going to come back, or if you were staying out, or anything like that. And I just, I had to watch the kids, and I didn't like that. Like, I understood you going, it didn't bother me that you went out so much. It bothered me when I had to watch the kids and stuff like that, and if ever anything happened, I felt like I had to do it.
Yeah.
And if they got upset or something, okay, I was there for them, but I felt like nobody was there for me.
Yeah. Linda's right, she was left in charge. I was very, very immature. Linda appeared to be so strong. Linda always was able to put up a front that she could handle things and don't worry about it and it'll be okay. And I depended on you. I really depended on Linda. She was a little girl.
Well, I'm still not as open with her as I could be.
I think you're scared. Come here. There he comes.
Well, I never used to think I had to talk about things in the past. But then I didn't know I had all these feelings inside of me until I started talking to Mom about it. And now I'm starting to, I think, understand why I'm like I am sometimes. And I feel a lot better.
Can I see the ghost?
Well, like a lot of things, like Mom did, like going away, going out overnight, going out drinking. A lot of times, like after I had my kids, I never went anywhere for the first 4 years. And I feel like I have to do everything with them, be with them all the time. And I think that's why I do that, because maybe Mom went out, a lot when we were kids, and I don't think that's right. It's lonely being left alone, 10 years old. I'm the domineering one. That's my family. It's my family. I've always been that way, like since I was about 7. You have to make sure everything's okay, and then when you get older, you can't just stop. Like I still do almost everything for them, but you can't. There's no way I'm going to be able to stick like glue with them, not as a teenager, because they'll hate me. And I don't ever want them to hate me. No, I never thought of it that way until just recently.
Mm-hmm. What made you start to see the connection back to your mom?
When you started talking to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we carry quite a few. So the one I was going to show you earlier, if I can find it.
I guessed that Doug Murphy was the child of an alcoholic when I looked through the self-help section in his bookstore cafe. I'm amazed at the number of books now being published about children of alcoholics. Doug prides himself in having read most of them.
It's not a bad theory.
Now he's looking into support groups for adult children of alcoholics. In a way, he's part of an enormous self-help movement that's just developed in the last few years.
Hi, can you tell me if you carry a book called A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking? Yeah.
Selling a lot of that book. It's one of our best sellers. We had it in a flyer we did, and so everybody's coming in and asking for it.
I
Yeah, I've
wondered
got
what
14
would make
on
a
hand.
successful 25-year-old like Doug want to read all those books and start questioning his past.
My childhood basically started off very normally. My mother was a nurse, my father a businessman, and I think up until the age of 8 or something, it was a fairly normal, happy childhood. But things began to deteriorate in my parents' marriage in and around that time. Both my parents were drinkers. My father was a heavy drinker. He was in the investment business, and that was part of the whole culture. My mother was more of an isolated drinker, and she was more of the visible alcoholic in the family. My parents separated when I was, I think, around 9, and they were divorced when I was 13.
Do you have any sense at all of why your mother drank?
Yeah, a lot. I think she was a very insecure person, and she had trouble with her feelings as well. Her father was an alcoholic as well. She lost a couple children before we were born, and there were a lot of reasons. And my father was traveling a lot, and he was a drinker too. So there was a whole bunch of reasons why Mom drank.
Did her drinking affect the way you felt about her?
I was angry with her, and many times wished that she would die so we could return to some kind of a normal family situation. When she was drinking, it was chaos. I mean, literally, there were dishes piled up, and then one day I'd come back from school, and poof, everything would be sparkling clean again, the meals cooked and laundry done, and we'd be normal again for a while. And the whole thing was extremely stressful. I mean, it was not a time when I ever felt relaxed. It was always looking over your shoulder and what kind of bomb's going to drop next. And so this went on for a very long period of time. I think basically for 6 years, and it got worse and worse. And my sister and I became a lot more able to look after ourselves, I guess, doing our laundry, making our dinners, basically being an adult at a very young age. I mean, I was 9 through 14, and my sister was 6 through 11. And we were basically tending to all the needs of ourselves at that age. So, you know, it was not a normal environment. And those are just the things that had to do with sort of keeping the status quo in the home. It's got nothing to do with the emotional nurturing, you know, that children need, and time with parents and all those sort of things. There was not very much of that.
How did you feel when your mother died? Was there any guilt?
I felt some guilt, not too much. I'm still not sure how much was in there, but there was some guilt. And then an immense sense of relief that perhaps finally we were sort of freed from this prison, because that's what it was really. It was just it was a no-win situation as a kid. It was just warfare in a sort of a strange emotional way. So it was really, you know, at the time I was very positive about what was happening when she died. I thought it was great. It's scary to say that, but that's what I felt. We were here one night, and she wanted to call him, but she didn't. And she was afraid she ran into him at the Morrissey if she didn't call him. So she called him first. And there was no answer, which was perfect.
After his father died, Doug and his younger sister Claire decided to stay on in their father's house. They're surrounded by many reminders of their childhood.
Did last night, actually.
Part of me thinks there's no way I could have come out of that environment normal, or at least healthy. When we were growing up, my sister and I had to depend on each other a lot. I was the one that would always big noise about, get your act together, Mom, or this is ridiculous. And then Claire would support me. But after a while, I began to realize that when I said, Mom, you're drunk again, the result would be that she'd get angry and she'd get more drunk and she'd stay drunk longer. And so that I guess somehow I learned to just in some way turn off my feelings so that I wouldn't feel a thing. So that I could just go steady state, stable as a rock. And, it's a survival tactic. Today there are a lot of things that I do that remind me of how I was as a kid, but I don't understand them because I think I shut a lot of it out. I know that all the problems didn't end when my mother died. One of the things I find about feelings is I'm never sure exactly what it is I'm feeling. I just know that there's something wrong, and it always feels like it's wrong. It never, except when it's like a jubilant feeling, and those are obvious. But most of the time when I have a feeling, it's like some kind of a rumbling, and I'm not sure what's going on, and I feel stressed or awkward or uncomfortable, especially within the context of an intimate relationship, because I'll have a feeling, my mood will change, and my partner might say, well, what's wrong? And I'll say, I don't know. Something's wrong, but I don't know. And then they may read that as being, oh, he just doesn't want to tell me what's bugging him, which isn't the case whatsoever. I just can't put my finger on it in the first place. I kind of learned when I was a child that one way to deal with all this stuff in my family was to always excel. That became very important to me. I'd always get on the hockey team, get A's, or be a model child, things like that. And I found that way things were easier for me at home. They should not be shy and bashful and bring a complaint to us. They still are. So we have to make sure they know that something happens. I learned to do that, and I guess I never really stopped doing it. For example, now that I'm in business, it's very important for me to be successful. But the problem is I never know when enough is enough. About these chicken breasts. Yeah, There's a number of things that I see as being, Doug's characteristics. I have to be stimulated at all times. Whether or not that's one of the reasons why I think I'm an entrepreneur is that there's always something to do. There's always a fire burning or excitement there, and that's what I like. For me to sit down and relax is difficult. That's one thing I really recognize, is that I always strive to be stimulated in some way or other. What I would refer to as the excitement junkie in me. And I know in myself I have an addictive personality. I mean, I can be addicted to anything. Business, women, coffee, beer, you name it. There are times when I probably should stay home, and I don't. There are times when I have a cold, for example, and I should just be in bed drinking chicken with rice soup. But no, I'll go out and run 4 miles and then go out drinking with a friend and come back at 2 in the morning. It's coupled with the excitement junkie element, but it's also self-destructive in the sense that why don't I recognize that I shouldn't be doing that? It's loving yourself a little bit. That's the hard thing for me. Probably because I was never taught to be good to myself. I just know that I've developed all these skills and stuff, partially because of being a child of an alcoholic. Many of us are overachievers, and I'm trying to sort of pull back and slow myself down. I'm not so sure that what I should be doing is just stepping back, backpacking through the Rockies or something, because I've always been churning out good grades and going to business school and all this sort of stuff, and haven't spent a lot of time being a kid.
What's wrong with being needing excitement in your life? What's wrong with any of that? Why do you want to change any of that?
I don't know what's wrong with it. Frankly, I just want to be able to understand why I do it. I may find that there's nothing wrong with it, and that's okay. But I don't want to go into it blindly. I don't want to sort of just keep on behaving the way I'm behaving. And end up in 10 years, handcuffed to a problem, and saying to myself, "My God, Doug, you knew better. You were there, you saw it all, and you let this thing happen."
Street in any small resort town in North America. To outsiders, it seems like a pleasant place to live. But for Doug Smith, it's a town that holds many memories he'd just as soon forget. Doug was born here 50 years ago and grew up in a family dominated by alcoholism. He doesn't live here anymore and rarely returns to visit, but he agreed to come back with me to talk about his childhood.
It's a beautiful town. It's amazing. I never noticed the beauty of this town till I was an adult. I mean, I guess as a child you're so busy in the confusion. I mean, that you're trying to survive. And don't realize the beauty you're surrounded by. Huh. And here's the street I grew up on. My grandmother's house. And my mom and dad's house. And the room in which I was born.
How far back does the addiction go in your family?
I mean, who knows where it began? What was I handed when I was born over there on that street? A history of addiction, history of alcoholism. Although in those days they didn't even identify it that way. You know, it's like, how far back does it go? I mean, it began for me personally in that room, in that house there, but where did it really begin? Who was the first alcoholic and how long has it gone on? They used to say, I'm sure that my father could drink. He drank a lot, really party. But nobody used that word alcoholism in those days. The addiction necessitated the family keeping a secret. It was a shameful thing. There was no understanding that alcoholism is a disease. My mother and father always presented the perfect family. The kids go to Sunday school. My mother was involved with the church. My father worked. But inside the home, there was a lot of manipulation, control, anger. My mother controlled the house totally. She was trying to keep a lid on it. All I remember is the rage and her anger at being with these two kids alone because he was out drinking. The two kids got it. Somewhere in those first 6 or 7 years in my hometown, I cut off and just started to operate almost by rote, like a robot, like I was in the world in action, but I don't think I thought about tomorrow or I never thought about what was happening. I was just surviving. I can see pictures in my head of things that happened. I can't really remember the feelings around them, except confusion. There's a lot of confusion. I can remember that things would go along wonderfully for a while, right? It would feel okay and everybody felt sort of good. And all of a sudden the world would collapse around us, you know. In my memory, it felt to me like there was no money. It even felt like there was no food sometimes because there was fights and arguments and tension. And I can remember up north where I'm from being in cars with my dad as he was out partying with his friends. And everybody's roaring drunk and racing around the country roads. And I had to be a very small child. And it just felt like living on the edge of a precipice all the time. I'd rather have a parent that drank every day so you'd know some continuity. You know, it may be ugly, but you know where they are every day. With someone who drank on a binge drinking, things feel okay and all of a sudden it's gone. I guess what it boiled down to was I felt that there was no love for me. I felt like unless I followed the rules, I would be isolated. So the only way to make connection was to do as I was told and to please everyone. And I had sexual partners from a very early age because there was sexual interference with me when I was very young by someone. Not one of my parents, but someone in the family. So of course it's called sexual abuse because I was so young, except that it felt like the only nurturing I had. So of course my unconscious connection was the nurturing comes from physical connection, from sexual connection. So I drew to me more more sexual interference, even at the age of 10 and 11, with someone who lived near our home who was 10, 15 years older than I was. I mean, I didn't feel as valuable as everybody else. It was reconfirmed by the parental system. I was told that I wasn't as valuable as everybody else. You know, you're told you're bargain basement goods. You act like bargain basement goods. I spent 42 years doing everything to build my self-esteem. I surrounded myself with people. I tried to earn a lot of money and get material success and some sort of validity from everything outside myself. I mean, to the point where I brought to myself a lot of emotional and physical stress by getting married too soon, much too young. There was a period when I ate chocolate. I mean, that sounds silly, but I ate chocolate a lot and weighed a lot. And then I discovered drugs, and that was one great way to stay out of my body. Every time I felt bad, I could smoke it away. I could snort it away with cocaine. And then it becomes worse and worse because the problems become compounded, and something that might have been a small problem gets multiplied by 1,000, so you have to take 1,000 times more drugs. I mean, it's just a growing episode. I was just so used to living on that edge of the precipice. That's another part of my own addiction. I was so used to living on the edge of the cliff that the drugs also helped me live on the edge of the cliff. I didn't know anything but chaos.
Is that where you feel comfortable?
Chaos. So I created chaos everywhere I turned. In my work, in relationships, in my home. It had to be chaotic because it's what I knew.
Mm-hmm. So, given the fact that you grew up in a situation where there was so much denial, I mean, it was a way of life for you.
Mm-hmm.
Then, how did you finally break out of that to admit that you yourself had a problem with addiction?
Oh, I mean, I believe my grandfather was an alcoholic. I know my grandfather was an alcoholic, and they deny that. I know my father was, and they deny that.
Your family denies it?
Oh, sure. I mean, they don't only want to remember good things. They say to me, don't remember that stuff. That doesn't matter. That's not true. You're exaggerating. You know? It came to me, and I took it to the edge. I mean, I was dying. I mean, I had to come out of my own denial about myself first, or I was going to die. I mean, truly, the week I went into treatment, I had two heart seizures. I mean, we'll call them heart seizures. I'd used so much cocaine that week that I had seizures. And my teeth were loose. I was losing weight. I was bankrupt emotionally, physically, intellectually. And it was either I come out of my denial or I die. If I come out of my denial about myself, I then have to look at why. Why did I go so far? What is in me that drove me to that madness? The liquor store, and that's a new invention here. The summer liquor store. It's only here in the summer. I mean, this was a dry county as I grew up. Yet everybody seemed to have alcohol because the whole area was full of bootleggers. Again, it's, a lot of people around here went to the bootleggers all the time, and they wouldn't be called alcoholic because who knew that word then? I mean, and who knew in the long term the terrible stress and unhappiness and dysfunction and inability to operate clearly in the world that this would cause in the long term. It's fine when you're in this locked community, and it's not fine, actually. I just know that at this time in my history, it stops with me. I come out of denial, and I come out of the secrets, and I'm going to come out of the wall of silence because I can't survive otherwise. I mean, there's still, no matter what anybody says, there's still, in the worldview, shame in it. My uncle's grave, and my father's parents' grave.
Is your father's father here?
Yep. I didn't know him, though.
Not at all?
No, not at all. He died 5 years before I was born. And he's one of those people, you ask a question and nobody seems to have an answer, or they avoid it. So I have this feeling that he's a key to it somehow. And a key to a door I'll never be able to unlock, because who's left that remembers it? I don't know.
You don't know if he was alcoholic?
No idea. I mean, I have a feeling there's something. And if I could unlock the key to him, it might help me understand why my father, who is buried here, is the way he is, or was the way he was. And help me understand maybe why I became the way I became. I mean, I come here a couple of times and stand and look at him and try to understand. I mean, I try to recall him and understand where this happened or when it happened. I mean, now I stand here and I really get sad that he's gone, because he never knew that I wanted to know him, wanted to care about him. I miss not having had him. I don't feel like I ever really had him as I imagine a father should be, because we had this barrier that was never able to be put aside.
What could you say to him now? What do you feel like? Do you mean, have you said everything you want to say to him?
Oh no. Oh no. Oh, I haven't.
Want us to stop?
No, it's okay.
When I stand at my mother's grave, I yell at her. I want to yell at her. Because I say, why? Why did that happen?
Oh, I can't yell at him anymore. Maybe there's understanding for him, because I went out and became an addict and went even further than he ever went, and was maybe in a lot of ways 10 times worse than he ever was. So no, there's no anger, certainly. None. I understand the alcoholism made the family need to create a certain kind of role. I can't do that. I mean, you finally have to take some action. I can sit forever and moan about how I understand it and how it hurt, but I have to finally say, okay, I know all that. Now what am I going to do about it?
Oh, God, the two old bitches lying in wait, same as always.
Well, we knew you'd come home.
Of course you knew you'd come home. You wait every bloody night. I don't know why I do come home. Oh, I don't know why I do come home. I come home to bring home money.
Your husband, if you wanted to marry him.
Okay. Come with me. All of that rage that she brings in you, you have our permission to say to her what you need to say. Say.
I should just leave my father alone. I don't want him to go away.
Louder.
I don't want him to go
Louder.
away. I want him to stay.
Louder. Go through the tears. Take a deep breath. Leave my father alone.
Just leave my father alone.
Louder.
Don't yell at him.
There's a lot of anger there.
Yes.
Let it go at her. She can handle it. After my own treatment, I became really interested in drama therapy as a tool in recovery from the addictive family system and for addicts. Breathe. Come on, darling.
I am important to my father. My father does care about me.
Louder. Make her hear you. Drama therapy is a process by which you can reenact the extreme moments of dysfunction to disclose to yourself how you really felt and what you felt like doing at that moment and were never allowed to do. To release and let go of all of that negative energy they're carrying from that time and come to some peace within themselves. If you weren't forced to be so nice to get people to like you, what would you say to them?
I would tell her that I do have feelings. And they are important, and I'm important. It's hard for me to do that.
I know, because you've never done it, have you?
No.
This is the beginning, you know. You know this is the beginning of getting well. It's when you give yourself the permission to go past those tears and that need to be so soft and say to these people what you have to say to them in a surrounding that is safe and supportive. Because the anger is merely energy that blocks you. And you're blocked here so tightly, you can't breathe past there.
There's no air getting below.
There's no getting air getting below. Because the negative energy from that anger is just, and so your voice goes like that. I have feeling. When you really want to say what?
I'm not even sure what I want to say.
You just want to be heard.
Mostly,
Just
yeah.
hear
just
me.
want to be heard that, you know, I do count for something. And I don't want to lose my father.
Okay. Okay, everybody. How did you feel observing that? Give Sarah feedback. What are you thinking about it, Tina? I hear you from over there.
I got a lot of emotional investment in Sarah being able to shout it one day.
Okay. Penny.
Larry set me right into the marriage,
Mhm.
and I just knew it was going to be violent. And the body language is what set me off.
Mhm.
I started to be paralyzed, and I tried to move my body just around to watch.
It could so easily have happened to me. And even acting that role scared me.
Does your anger really lie with this man? Do you ever allow yourself to get angry?
Very seldom.
You create a dynamic as working with this group where they start to feel that there is a new extended family of origin to whom they can turn during their recovery from the issues of growing up in an alcoholic home, in which there are no secrets, there is no rejection, there are no judgments. The kind of supportive family we need on an emotional level to set us free to live in the world as self-governing adults.
With an aunt or with an uncle.
Memories. Sometimes it's hard to live with them, but you can't live without them. It's not easy to go back in the past and relive the experience of growing up with an alcoholic. But one thing I've learned from Doug Smith is that you have to confront those memories someday, and then the real work begins. Linda Simons is just starting to get a new perspective on her childhood, but it's already made a difference to her life now. She feels that it's good for her to have some time apart from her kids, and has decided to go to work full-time. And since she started talking to her mother, Linda notices that things are much more open between the two of them. Doug Murphy is finding it hard to make changes in his life, even though he knows what he needs to do. He's determined to slow down and stop driving himself so hard. But he's frustrated because he realizes you can't change your life overnight. As for me, no matter how much I try to control my life now, I still feel as if everything is about to fall apart. But when I think about how my childhood was turned upside down by my mother's drinking, it all starts to make sense. I just have to accept what happened back there and stop wishing it had all been different. Maybe there's no such thing as a normal childhood or perfect parents, after all. Every day now, I meet more and more adult children of alcoholics. Many of us are starting to ask the same questions about where we came from and how the past has shaped our lives today. If we can only recognize the nature of our problems, we can choose to do something about them. It's only a beginning, but at least it's a place to start.